Donald Trump has once again proven that he is nothing more than a power-hungry bully, willing to strong-arm, intimidate, and outright threaten anyone who dares to stand in his way. His latest target? The state of Maine and its governor, Janet Mills. And why? Because Mills refuses to enforce his latest hateful, bigoted, and unnecessary attack on transgender athletes. So, in true Trump fashion, rather than having a real conversation or respecting state autonomy, something conservatives supposedly value, he went straight for his favorite move, blackmail. During a White House meeting, Trump had the gall to tell Governor Mills that if Maine didn't comply with his discriminatory executive order banning transgender athletes from women's sports, they wouldn't get federal funding. Let that sink in. The President of the United States is willing to screw over an entire state, strip it of funding that supports public schools, healthcare, infrastructure, disaster relief, just to enforce his hateful, fear-mongering agenda. This isn't leadership. This is straight-up extortion. It's a mafia boss move, the kind of thing you'd expect from a third-world dictator, not a U.S. president. And the fact that Trump and his goons think this is acceptable, wielding federal resources as a weapon to punish states that don't fall in line, is as un-American as it gets. This man, who wraps himself in the flag and screams about freedom, is perfectly fine treating the country like his personal kingdom, where governors must bow to his demands or suffer the consequences. Let's be honest, Trump doesn't give a damn about women's sports. He never has, and he never will. This isn't about fairness or competition. It's about using the transgender community as a scapegoat, demonizing a vulnerable group for political points. He knows his base eats up this garbage because it plays into their manufactured culture war, the same war he stokes every time he needs a distraction from his failures. And let's talk about the cruelty here. Withholding federal funding isn't some minor inconvenience. It has real, devastating consequences. We're talking about money that funds education, roads, public health programs, and disaster relief. Maine, like every other state, relies on federal dollars to ensure its citizens have access to basic services. But none of that matters to Trump. He's perfectly content watching children lose school funding, hospitals struggle, and families suffer if it means he gets to flex his power. And for what? To enforce a policy that doesn't even solve a real problem? To push a narrative that trans athletes are somehow a threat, when in reality, the number of trans women competing at elite levels is minuscule? It's absurd, and this isn't even the first time Trump has pulled this nonsense. This is a pattern. He has repeatedly threatened to strip funding from blue states whenever they stand up to him. Remember when he tried to cut wildfire relief to California because the state didn't vote for him? Or when he wanted to punish New York for being a sanctuary state? He doesn't care about fairness. He doesn't care about democracy. He cares about one thing: control. If you don't bend the knee, he will do everything in his power to make you suffer. That's not how a president should operate. That's how an authoritarian does. Governor Mills' response was exactly what it needed to be: see you in court. And thank God for leaders like her, because if people don't start standing up to this lunatic, he will only get worse. This is why he can never, ever be allowed to sit in the Oval Office again. Imagine what he'll do if he gets back in power. If he's willing to withhold critical funding from an entire state just to push a hateful, unnecessary policy, what's next? Will he start punishing states that don't restrict abortion? Defund cities that refuse to criminalize LGBTQ+ people? Strip funding from any governor who criticizes him? At this point, nothing is off the table. The terrifying part is that Trump isn't just some washed-up has-been. He's still the leader of the Republican Party, and there are millions of people out there cheering him on for this. That should scare the hell out of everyone. If he's given another term, there will be no checks and balances, no restraint, no guardrails. He will rule by vengeance, by threats, by sheer force. He will turn the presidency into an authoritarian hammer, smashing every state, leader, and person who dares to oppose him. Maine is just the latest victim of his sick power games. But if people don't wake up and push back, it won't be the last. If we let this stand, if we accept that a president can hold federal funding hostage to force states into submission, then we might as well admit that democracy is on life support. Because at that point, we're not living in a country of laws anymore. We're living in Trump's America, where loyalty to him is the only thing that matters, and everyone else is expendable.